right, Madera Companies, it's good to have you back for another episode of Touch Base. Today we've got another interview for you as we continue this journey through figuring out the different operations and departments that we've got going on across all of the 5 companies. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, we have Madera Residential, we have Quext, a couple of those guys are joining me today. And then we also have Rockwood, Viva First, and Select Title. Joining me today at the table, and I'm excited to have these two guys with me, are Shawn Massie, the Chief Technology Officer for Madera Residential and for Quext, and then the Vice President of Innovation for Quext, Tray Johnson. So guys, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks Josh.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's do this real quick. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us kind of how you got to Madera, maybe previous jobs, a little bit about your family. You know, just give us a little sneak peek into who you are.
Sure. So I was born, raised in Lubbock, moved around for a while. So my dad worked for UPS, got transferred to Montana. So moved to Montana, high school in Nebraska, came back, college at Abilene Christian, graduated with a degree in electronic media thinking I was going to go make movies. And that did not happen.
Here we are.
Yeah, and yet here we are.
That's right.
That's exactly right. Found myself as a lab technician running a couple departments for an environmental lab in Midland, and really was not happy. Came down to it, me and the wife just decided, hey, we're just going to move to Lubbock. So we quit our jobs, moved to Lubbock, very quickly found out you cannot rent an apartment without credit. Didn't have any credit. Worked our way into a duplex. Had a few jobs here and there, but longest run was with Texas Tech University doing application development, report writing. Got into that a little bit before with system implementations, all the software stuff. So it was really, really heavy into the data side of things. Kind of ran into one of those ceilings that you can run into with a job or a career where you're not going to move forward without some type of lateral move. And through lots and lots of waiting and prayer and friendship, was introduced to Dave Marcinkowski over at lunch. And he'll tell you he wasn't looking to do anything, but he was hoping he could help me out. And he liked me so much, he offered me a job a few months later, and the rest was kind of history from that point.
Yeah, very cool. So tell us real quick, though, how long have you been here?
Since January of 17.
Okay, and so you started with Madera, and then you've even seen kind of the birth of Quext as we kind of get into that story here in just a little bit.
Yes, and then some.
Yes, and then if I'm not mistaken, you came in, what, 2018? So
April 2018.
Okay,
Yep.
Tray came in 2018. Give us a little bit about your history.
Sure. So I grew up a small town farm kid in the, I'm from Olton, Texas. Pretty typical small town kid type childhood. I played all the sports that you could think of, right? I had a great time with that. But, going and looking to college, and growing up on a farm, it's kind of bred into you to where you kind of have some sort of mechanical aptitude. And so for me, I was good at math, and so mechanical engineering made a lot of sense for me. So I went to Texas Tech and graduated in 2007. But I've always had this, affinity, and I really like electronics, and developing things and making things. And so I always thought that I wanted to work for a military defense company, right? So I didn't know, coming out of college, if I wanted to go to Lockheed Martin or Raytheon. And got a job offer from Raytheon, and I thought that I was going to build missiles and work on fighter jets and all kinds of cool things like that. But, it's as it goes with life, you learn, and you figure out what you don't know, right? And very quickly I realized that, it was going to take me a long time. And there's so many people that work for those companies that it takes you a long time before you really get to work on the really cool and really fun things. So had an opportunity to move back to Lubbock and work for an agricultural technology company called Smartfield. Again, where I'm making and working on electronics and helping develop products, and again, it was in a startup environment, which, I did that for about 9 years, and then, kind of a similar, introduction, in that whenever you talked a little bit about the genesis and birth of Quext, as all of that was starting to happen, that's whenever my old boss actually knew Dave Marcinkowski quite well, and so we got introduced, and I just happened to say, look, if you ever need anybody to help you go make this vision happen, let me know. And I've got a passion for these things, and we'll dive into that here in a little bit later, but like I've got a personal passion and I really enjoy working on like smart home type electronics, and so being that's what we were interested in going down that road, right? Whenever the birth of Quext was starting to come to pass, that's when I got connected, and so it was really it was good timing, and it was a perfectly matched to not just my skill set, but what I love to do. And so
that is awesome. It's funny. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Trey, you and I did, Trey, just about how, in Lubbock, it feels like there's one degree of separation for almost everybody, even though there's like 250,000 people in the city. There's just everybody. Somebody that everybody else knows, or something like that. Let's talk about Quext for a little bit. Let's talk about not just its genesis, but I think there are people, maybe even some of our other companies that hear Quext. They're like, okay, we do apartment technology, but what does that actually mean? And if we're doing apartment technology, like what were some of the problems that Madera Residential saw that you guys are now addressing in some really like cutting edge types of ways? So kind of talk us through that, and you guys just play off each other and let's kind of see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, I would say when I started, it was very apparent that technology was behind in our space, even just from a Madera perspective. So initial onset, looking only at Madera, didn't know a whole lot, but knew, hey, there were some operational efficiencies we could get with some simple technology. So that was where we came in. We rolled out one login, and that helped, but it was kind of a precursor into just a thought process. That thought process carried us through that April's Texas Apartment Association conference, where when you look at it, you're like, man, the apartment industry is just behind. And there's a lot of technology out there that could be utilized to make it better, but we didn't want to just do that. It wasn't just, hey, let's grab what's off the shelf and do it, but let's ask all those questions. Are we doing that the right way? And we really started just looking at it like that. So what we decided to help with that complexity was, at the same time, we would start looking at smart technology.
How are you going to let those vendors in?
Yeah, no, right. And we knew there's the big three on that. It's locks, lights, and thermostats. And we had deemed locks and access control as number one, because you got to get into somewhere, just like Trey said.
Right.
So we bring in one of Trey's work accomplices. Trey comes in. We're also talking to two other companies at the same time. We're like, how do we do this? How do we do this for Madera at that point in time? And that's when Trey comes in.
And it's really interesting too, because at that time we were just talking about the access piece, right? And again, it starts a lot of times. Companies can even form with a first thought, right? Just like you were talking about with risk assessment, that starts ballooning, right? And even though maybe we didn't start with risk assessment, it served as a purpose for discovery for all of the things that maybe we realize would have the greatest potential impact, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But interestingly enough, when we talk about the technology, I think this is important to go back to. In our first season, Marcinkowski, Dave kind of talked through this understanding of apartment technology was still stuck in like the 90s, like literally still stuck in the 90s. And so you guys are jumping like 20 years into the future and saying we got to bring this whole industry, or at least our piece of this industry, into 2017, 2018, 2019, now here we are into 2021.
Yes, very, very much so. And our first steps on what we were looking at weren't even like 2018 moves. It was like, welcome to 2001. And it was they were very small incremental steps from that standpoint, but it was a monumental difference that we were trying to tackle. And to an extent, we're still trying to tackle that. And once we realized the complexities behind it, I think the vision in order to get there started to present itself. And that's where you see the things that we're putting out now. We're reaching those marks.
Yeah.
We're at the edge or at the bleeding edge and moving forward, and we're not sitting way back in 2000.
And we won't go too far down into the rabbit hole of the whys and the hows, but if you just think of it from a practical perspective, right? When a lot of these groups that started companies in the 90s and early 2000s, if you just think about technology and the way things were back then, if you were going to make something right in the 90s and 2000s, you compare that to something modern, like that's brand new today, right? There's just no way that those would compare. And unfortunately, a lot of those older legacy groups are still handcuffed by the way that they used to do things back in the 90s and 2000s. So they have to support both, paradigms, whereas we get to start fresh, and we understand the limitations of a lot of those systems, and those are built into all of the Quext products.
Well, and evolution is important too, because when we start talking about seeing the new technology and the needs that we have out here today, like there's a reason why none of us are carrying a BlackBerry right now. Like we've kind of moved on from that, right?
You don't know what phone's in my pocket.
I so hope you have like a flip phone Nokia. Please.
And next week we've got our new Vice President of Innovation.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So let's talk products that are not BlackBerry related or flip phone Nokia related. Let's talk products and some of the things that you guys are working on. So give me just a feel. We've got a couple of folks who are going to be coming in the next little bit to talk about websites and connect and those types of things. But you two specifically have spent a lot of time on digital human and IoT. And so walk us through that. One, what it is. EOT, or however people like misspell it or missay it or whatever, but like talk us through. Why don't we start with you, Trey? Talk us through IoT a little bit, and like what is it? I know that's your baby. Talk us through how you're working through that.
So EOT is actually IoT, or Internet of Things. And so for those of you that may not necessarily have much familiarity with why that term exists, right? So when you think of the modernization of our world, network connectivity is prevalent almost everywhere. And so the concept now arises where, okay, if I can connect every device type very simply, then I can start to do really cool and neat things. I can garner lots of insights about almost everything, and that becomes very, very powerful. And we want to particularly extend that concept to our apartment communities. Many of us, we're familiar with the devices themselves. So we talk about smart locks and thermostats and smart hubs. In this industry, that's not a new concept. Groups have been doing that, probably since 2016 or 17 or something like that. But the challenge has been is there's no, we haven't seen a widespread adoption of this technology, and there's a reason why. It's very complicated and it's very cost prohibitive to do so. And it's just the way that I'll back up. The way that other groups have gone about deploying this technology drives a lot of expense. I think there was a survey in 2019 that asked, I think it was an NAA survey, and they asked apartment owners and operators, why haven't you adopted smart technology? Everybody realizes the benefit that you could realize. Why haven't we done it yet? And it was cost and complexity driving it. That's where we came up with our thermostat hub. And I mentioned it's patented, but what does that actually mean, right? And Lynn Smith and her team and Ben Brook are intimately familiar with it. But for those of us that aren't, what it is we combined a smart hub and put it into a thermostat. So it's in one device. So no longer do you have to have this extra device on a property that you don't really have a good place to put it. You don't have a good place to get it powered and to make sure it's out of the way where a resident won't mess with it. We were able to combine those devices and then simplify the network infrastructure. And those key concepts are really what make our device and our solution as a whole the most unique, right, in the industry. And I don't say that because it's my baby. Of course, I'm going to say that, but I just say that because, all these different perspectives, and it really, truly is a very novel approach to deploying smart home technology in apartments. It's so much more lightweight and simple.
Well, and I think it's also important to say, it takes care of the resident in ways that the resident didn't get in the past. I think all of us have experienced at some point having to call up some sort of internet provider and wait until they can get there to take care of you. And with today's world, internet is a need and a necessity all the time. Having gone through what we did with COVID and people staying home and all those types of things, the idea that our residents would be in the future, hopefully all of our residents, be able to have internet, period. It's just part of what it means to live with us in a culture that has seen so much upheaval, but yet now we see you guys providing the services for a need that in the past you didn't have accessible all the time.
And to add on to that, how cool is it now that we make this solution in the smart home IoT product that is more affordable, easier to deploy, easier to manage. Now I can open that up to a bigger portion of the market.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes sense to deploy these technologies in some of the other communities that might not have before. So it's being able to provide more residents a service that's really valuable. Right. So, you know, I like to talk about this as often as I get a chance to. You know, who is it that would perhaps, or which group of residents would want to, or even maybe need to save money on using smart home technology, right? I mean, it's probably not those in an A+ high rise in downtown somewhere, right? It's probably somewhere in, maybe it's a Class B garden style community somewhere. Those people, it matters more to be able to save money on a thermostat bill, let's say, or an energy bill. And so now that we've come up with a solution that's extensible to a broader portion of the market, now we're able to provide a service to someone that is more useful and more needed in different ways. I mean, sure, everybody may or some people might think it's cool, right? Oh, I would like to live at this community because it's got smart locks and thermostats, but there's a whole other user group out there that may have a need to be able to let their kid into the door whenever they're coming home from school, or they may need to be able to save money on a bill during the month.
Yeah,
so,
no, that is absolutely huge. I love hearing about that because I love the fact that you're taking care of people, not just making money, and I think that's a big part of what makes Madera. That the values drive what we do. Let's transition to one of our other products, and Shawn, I know you've been working intimately with this one. Talk to us about Digital Human, because not only do we have a digital human that can help with a lot of things when it comes to apartment needs, but now you guys have even branched out and gone beyond the English language. You're into the Spanish language, but kind of like walk us through a little bit of what the digital human is and how it's helping people.
And it is a complicated product, and I say that in the best way because it's doing so many things all at the same time, but it's really close. It's something that sounds cool when you start to work on it. It was created, the digital human component was created by movie guys. Mm-hmm. So the people that made the Hobbit movies and some of those other movies came out and formed this company called Soul Machine out of New Zealand. And what they did is they created lifelike avatars. And those avatars live there, and the plan was you would go in and write a script for your property over a period of like 6 weeks to 3 months. And you would write one script for that property, and that would become that property's script. And it would then talk to you. In addition to talking to you, it's doing facial and voice analysis to see what your emotional state is, and it builds an emotional quotient based on your interaction with it. All that sounds really cool, but it's hard to scale that product to 50 plus Madera properties or to anyone else out in the country when it's taking 6 weeks or more to get one property up and running. So we started kind of putting our heads together on that. And that's one of the things about Quext, that it's hard to understand unless you are in it, but we really do a great job. As Trey was touching on all the diversities of our backgrounds, we also all come about things from a different angle, which adds a lot. And I like to frame it up as it's a mantra or an environment of creative curiosity of, hey, this is where we need to go. I'm not going to tell you anything more than that. And you just start throwing out ideas. How crazy they may be is up to you, but it always leads to more thought. So as we did thermostat, as we're doing digital human or any of the other products, that's really how we approach it. And Trey has his own ways of approaching things, and I have my own ways of approaching things. And with digital human, we said we need to do this in less than a week, right? And no one thought we could do it, and we ran through the process. And I remember I had a call with someone at Soul Machine, and I was like, I know you think this takes a long time, but what if I told you we could do it in less than 30 minutes? And he's like, oh, there's no way. And right now, when marketing runs a digital human setup, we're holding true to an initial setup in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
Which is crazy, but it's all due to the creative environment that we're building of hey, we're not just going to do things the way that it was done. We're going to ask all the questions and say, well, why couldn't we do it different?
Yeah. So how does this digital human like impact the resident? How does it aid property staff? Talk to me about like what problems did you solve with this?
Yeah, it's really two pieces. The first one is it's a lot of information. A lot of what people are trying to gather about a property is general information. Hey, show me your swimming pool. Do you have a dog park? What kind of dog do I have? How much is the application fee? Do you have a 2-bedroom apartment? The conversations typically flow that way when we look at them. And so the digital human comes in and can provide all of that information. At the same time, that's a very inhuman, unpersonal process. And what the Soul Machine digital human on top of that does is it adds a little bit of that human element to it, where you feel somewhat like you're actually talking to a person and you're not just talking to another computer chatbot. So that's very important to us. It offloads a level of questioning that the property would get.
Yeah.
And it takes that to the point where it's going to schedule a tour and get that in-person association.
Yeah.
So that the overall flow is that, hey, let me get your questions, and the goal of the digital human is to do that tour and bring the property staff and do those in-person interactions.
Which that tour is huge because it gives people a chance to see what's going on and what the type of unit they could live in when it comes to our properties. But you look at the way the world works today, and people are taking these virtual tours with our digital human at 10 o'clock at night, because that's when they could do it, or whatever it was. And even when they can't show up on property, they're still getting that touch and getting to walk through the units, which is pretty crazy and pretty awesome.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Man, I just want to say thank you to both of you for coming on and talking about this. You guys seem to be putting forth every effort to take care of one another and even our on-site staff. And so first of all, thank you both for doing that. Thank you for being here. And to our Madera Companies team members, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for listening in. I hope you learned something. If you've got questions about those products, do not ask me. Ask one of these two guys, and they will tell you more about it. And we're going to have another podcast for you next week. So I hope you'll join us then too. Have a good one.
Stay classy, San Diego. I'm just kidding.